loud. Okay. Shri Hari. Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devye Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindevyo Sarva-lokāya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chadarmasya Sarva-dharma Sarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishna Te Namaha Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Ashmarachara Prayantam Vande Gurum Paramparam Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Deva Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Om Bhadrakalya Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Veda Vedanta Vedanga Vidyastana Vevacha Sri Ganesha Sharda Guru Bhyo Namaha. Today is also a day called Shitala Saptami, the Jayanti day of Shitala Devi. And from our last talk on the Hindu goddess, we talked about Kula Devis and Grama Devis. Shitala Devi is one of those classic Grama Devis and Kula Devis, including the family deity of Sri Ramakrishna's family. So we'll recite her pranam mantra from the Shitalashtakam. Shitale tvam jagamata, shitale tvam jagapita, shitale tvam jagadatrim, shitalaye namo namaha. O Shitala, you are the world mother. O Shitala, you are the world father. O Shitala, you are the port of the entire world. To you, Goddess Shitala, we bow again and again. Jai Ma. And we pray to her that all of you remain healthy and free of disease, and your children and family are protected. Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. So very happy to continue our Devi Gita class. Reading from the Srimad Devi Gita there's about 6 or 7 Devi Gitas from different Puranas. We're reading the Devi Gita from the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, a very advanced, developed, and beautiful goddess theology text, as we've been discussing. And we're using the translation, those who are watching new, of C. Mackenzie Brown. This is a version, but we're also presenting other translations as well as our own kind of running translation. And so we've only, this is our fourth meeting? I think it's our fourth meeting.
Right.
Fourth meeting. Whoever is not muted, I'll mute a few people here. Yeah, okay. Our fourth meeting, and we're now at verse 6 or verse 7. And there's a lot of verses, so I don't know how far we'll go. And so the Devi Gita, the core of the Devi Gita is a conversation between the gods, headed by the Himalaya, personified Himalaya, and the Devi, the supreme goddess here shown as Devi Bhuvaneshwari Devi, Bhuvaneshwari. But there's a frame story to get there, and Janamanjaya is talking to Vyasa about when something happened where a mystical light appeared, an infinite light. Tell us that story. You mentioned it briefly. And so Vyasa backs up and mentions the story of how Sati left her body, when Daksha insulted Shiva and her, and she gave up her body and disappeared from the world. And then we mentioned briefly last week, we began to mention Shiva taking the corpse, moving around through the 3 worlds, holding the corpse of Sati, and what happened at that point. So this is where we left off. I'm going to share a screen here so you could see some verses we were on. This is the verse we ended on last week, right? About Shiva when Sati committed sati, as we see, we use the word sati as a wife dying in this particular way. When Sati left her body, Shiva was in extreme grief. We didn't mention, but there's a series that was very popular at one point on Indian television called Devanki Dev Mahadev, Shiva, the Lord, the God of gods, and it has the slightly the aesthetics and the of Indian devotional serials, Puranic serials, mythological serials, which it's not exactly up to Hollywood standards, perhaps. It's a particular style, right? But it's a beautifully told story. We spent, I don't know how many thousands, hundreds of hours, 1,000 episodes, I think we watched of this over several years. But they spent all the money they saved in production value for the first season, they used for the final scene of the first season. And the final scene was the death of Sati. And as Shiva is meditating in Kailash, and Sati is experiencing what she's experiencing, I believe that's believed to have taken place in Hador actually, but at her father's sacrifice. When Sati leaves her body in the show, I mean, I get chills thinking about it. Shiva goes, Sati, and the entire Kailash bursts into flames. It's a spectacular, I mean, very emotional, even to think about or remember it, but it's a very emotional thing. And then he sends very fierce incarnations, his Shaktis, Virbhadra and Bhadrakali, to destroy the sacrifice. We mentioned a little bit last week. Very powerful moment. And then, so the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam mentions that he carried the body around. Some texts don't go into such detail, some versions of the story, and then we have a further developed story that Vishnu, either with his chakra or with his arrows, cut up the body, and then the body fell. The Devi Bhagavatam version is that story, and the Devi Bhagavatam is a fairly late telling of the story. And it's important, and we'll see in our in Sunday's talk for the Hindu goddess class on the Shakti-pītams and pilgrimage. It's about this story. A major part of it is where her body parts fell, became holy places associated with the goddess. Traditional 51, 52 Shakti-pītams. But the chapter directly before, not even, I mean, this is verse 6, so 6 verses before, right, talk about the Shakti-pītam. So this is very fresh in the storyline, where where Sati left her body, Shiva carried her corpse. The corpse was cut up in 108 there in this story version, the 108 pieces, and it lists this piece fell here, and Ma is known by this name in this tirtha. And Ma's earring fell here, Ma's finger fell here, her nosing fell here, her neck fell here, her breast fell here, and she's known at that place by a certain name. It gives that whole litany. This is literally the verses right before verse 1 of the Devi Gita. And it says, just remembering, one who remembers or recites these names attains a divine abode. I forget the exact verses, the Palstuti. So even remembering these holy places, but to speak of visiting those places, embodying those places, which we'll be discussing on Sunday in our pilgrimage class. So we'll pick up the story there. This is the verse 5 is we mentioned last week. We described this last week. I have to move this a little bit. I'm having a hard time reading here. He was unaware of the manifest world, his mind being fully absorbed. I'm gonna have to read it here. My screen's not fully visible to me right now for some reason. He was not aware of the manifest world, his mind being fully absorbed in samadhi. Regaining his self-composure, he passed the time contemplating the true form of the goddess, of Devi. Devi, dhyanam Devi sarupam, the true form of Devi, meditating on her original essential nature, or even meditating on her four-armed form of Bhuvaneshwari. So we'll jump from there. Verse 6. Saubhāgya-rahitaṃ jātaṃ trailokyaṃ sa-carācaram śaktī-hīnaṃ jagat-sarvaṃ sābdhi-dvīpaṃ sa-parvatam. So while Shiva is in grief, first he's in grief and now maybe in meditation, closing his eyes, ignoring the material world. And we mentioned a little bit last week that this could also mean, since he didn't have Shakti, the Devi, the goddess, as his immediate companion as Sati. Sati no longer, goddess is no longer in a human form, in an accessible form to him. Here, the external form, he decided to meditate on her eternal form, right, as consciousness, right, her swarupa, right, mentioned in the last verse, right, and therefore he closed his eyes and went into and meditated internally in samadhi instead of opening his eyes and seeing in the world, because she's not in the world, she's disappeared. Of course, she is in the world, and the next few verses will mention this. She has to be in the world, but she's not obvious. So, saubhāgya-rahitaṃ jātaṃ, trailokyaṃ saraswati. So while that's happened, while Shiva's meditating and Devi has withdrawn, so Shiva's not paying attention. He's meditating on the Supreme Devi as consciousness within. And Devi is no longer manifest as Sati. So she's disappeared, right? What would imagine that state for the rest? I mean, Shiva himself is in samadhi and secluded, ignoring the world, and Devi's disappeared. What's going to happen to the world? The world's going to be in a very dangerous and chaotic state, right? So it says, meanwhile, the three-tiered universe, all that is mobile and immobile, lost its auspicious charm. When the entire world, which is oceans, continents, and mountains, was bereft of the. I got the wrong verse here. Hold on. Was bereft of energy, bereft of shakti, śaktī-hīnaṃ. It says, right. So let's look at this. What this possibly. I mean, it's obviously what it means, but let's look at it a little deeper. As far as what is this trailokyaṃ? Trailokyaṃ means the three worlds. And that's something, okay, we'll go through the verse by verse first. I have to get my rhythm here. Saubhāgya-rahitaṃ jātaṃ. Saubhāgya-rahitaṃ jātaṃ. So, this saubhāgya, what's saubhāgya? He translated as lost its auspicious charm. Saubhāgya means, actually we have somebody in our group here, one sadhu, has this in his name. Saubhāgya means auspicious. Means auspiciousness. It also means like successful, success, auspicious, loveliness, charm. When it has these layers of meaning. So, because in one sense, Shakti can't disappear, right? He says in saubhāgya-rahitaṃ. When Sati disappeared, and therefore Sati seemed to have left the world, it seemed, or what's really left is saubhāgya, the auspiciousness, this beauty and auspiciousness that she was in the world, that people could see her. Imagine if you're in a room and you literally can hang out with the goddess and see her, and realize that makes everything meaningful. And if she's not there, obviously not there, even though she may theoretically be there as a principle, as a tattva, as truth, existentially, it's not the same. You don't have, her saubhāgya is missing, the charm, the beauty, the thing that gives things value and meaning, and disappears. From what the three trailokyaṃ, this is the three-tiered universe. We say goddess is Tripura Sundari, the most beautiful in the three worlds. The three world is continuously repeated throughout. And of course, different texts say there's 14 worlds, there's 118 worlds. There's this listing is according to different texts. This idea of the three world is clustering the many worlds into three main categories. Generally, when we say in the Gayatri mantra, there's the Bij mantra of the Gayatri, Bhur-bhuva swaha. These are the three worlds. But even the full Gayatri doesn't have three worlds; it has seven worlds. Bhur-bhuva swaha, maha janaha tapaha janaha satyam. There's seven worlds mentioned, and you can go to 14 worlds, 7 worlds above, 7 worlds below, 118 worlds. In Kashmir Shaivism, they describe 118 worlds. And one time, one of our friends asked the great master, Swami Lakshmanju, what is 118 worlds? How do we know there's not more? So there may be more, but the great saints have only visited 118 of them. And he himself said, actually, a funny story, our friend George, disciple of Swami Lakshmanju, was late he brought him his tea, would bring him his tea, and he says, "You're late, you're 15 minutes late." He says, how do you know I'm 15 minutes late? Well, that's how long it takes me to circumambulate the 118 worlds. So while you were gone, I did my parikram, my pilgrimage around. So 118 is also an important number, and like I said, 14. But 3 is important because it's representative. Sometimes we say A, B, C to mean A through Z, right? So Bhur-bhuva Swaha, or here means earth, heaven, and the underworld, the netherworlds, right? So in a sense, it's the underworld or the astral or ancestral realm, something like that, the earthly realm, and then the swaraloka, the heavenly realm. So in this story, and in these stories, these are the main worlds we're dealing with. We have the world, the earthly realm, where we are, right? Then we have the heavenly realms of the gods and the hellish realms of the demons, right? So that's the general structure of the 3 worlds here. When the Devi withdrew, the 3 worlds lost their charm. And it says, sa-carācaram, right? Sa with, chara acharam. Chara means to move, achara means not moving, right? So it's this movable and immovable thing. So this is a very, very common thing, move on unmovable things. Even we have a guru mantra that says the guru is the one who lets us see the truth behind everything that's moving and unmoving, right? Or within everything that's moving and unmoving. So it's a code. I'll give you a key, right? Chara, moving and unmoving things means Jeev and Jagat. Jeev means living things, and Jagat means the material world, the universe. And so usually we have in Hindu theology, we have 3 things that have to be dealt with, right? You say, oh, and what are they? How to relate to God? What's their reality? There's Ishvara, God, right? Or Brahman or Devi, Bhagavan, like that. So whatever the conception of the source and substratum and cause. So Ishvara, and you have Jiva and Jagat, the world, the living beings and the universe. So what is the relationship between these things? So this is that term, chara, the moving and unmovable things. Of course, when Devi withdrew, she couldn't really withdraw, because if the Devi, which is life, withdraws from Jiva, then we have death, right? No living thing could be alive without Devi, without Shakti, right? And non-moving things also would cease to exist because she is existence. She is the existence of existent things. So non-moving things would cease to have a reality, and living things would die. So saying so they didn't really lose their Shakti, they lost their saubhāgya, the charming aspect of Shakti, the obvious, the experiential, the beautiful, the blissful, the joy-giving, right? And so we can also, the next verses will also show what happens. We could also, we're not actually bereft of our connection with God and the goddess. Impossible, right? She's here. I mean, if she wasn't here, we wouldn't be here. We'd cease to, if Shakti disappeared, our dead body would fall to the ground. And if our Shakti doesn't disappear, the dead body would cease to exist. Nothing would exist without her. She's existence, the foundation, the womb of existence, right? So it's important that what's withdrawn when Sati died is saubhāgya, the Shakti as saubhāgya, the lovely, the obvious, the charming, right? So what happened? Śaktī-hīnaṃ, when Shakti withdrew, or as I said, Shakti can't really withdraw. śaktī-hīnaṃ jagat-sarvaṃ sābdhi-dvīpaṃ sa-parvatam. That's what, so it means when she withdrew from jagat-sarvaṃ, from this entire world, the entire world, this jagat is there. Sarvam, what is this world? He's being specific with its continent. Actually, he says sa-dvīpa, dvīpams, let's see, abdihi means ocean or seas or lakes. Dvīpam means island, right? But here it means islands, but there's really big islands. When you're talking about the entire world, you're not talking about little islands. You're talking about continents, right? So dvīpam also means continents, right? So that's, I think he's translated as ocean, which are continents and mountain, and sa-parvatam, and mountains. So everything lost its charm, including the entire world, of oceans, mountains, and continents and mountains. And I think there's a play here. We were discussing, this was our tea time discussion of this play for Parvat, because what's going to happen is who is I mean, not yet, but shortly the stories can be told about the Himalayas, the great mountain, the symbolic, the king of mountains, right? And Shakti is going to be born as his daughter in the story. So so he's going to get, so Shakti is going to be born in the mountain as the daughter of the mountain, as Parvati. So I think here's a sa-parvat. Parvat is without Shakti, and so I think there's a little hint, a little poetic hint, that at the end of the Devi Gita, right, Shakti will agree, the supreme goddess Bhuvaneshwari in this story will agree to be born as Parvati to marry Shiva to accomplish what is required in these next few verses is going to be spelled out. So I think it's a hint, because Shakti withdrew from Parvat, and now Shakti is going to be born in Parvat. And Parvat, the Himalaya, also means Mandara mountain, the central mountain of the universe. Mandara mountain also means the body. The Mandara mountain is the top of the body. The Himalaya, the Parvat is our body. Parvati, she who's within our body. In Tantra and Yoga, they use that type of images a lot, where she who comes out of the body, out of Parvati appears in the Chandi stories, and she comes out of a sheath, out of the body, right? Out of the mountain, which means has been understood esoterically by yogis and tantrics as Kundalini, as a Devi within the Shakti within our body is Kundalini. So I think there's a hint here that by being born as the daughter of Parvati, of Parvat, of Himalaya, the mountain, that also means she's being born symbolically or personally, not just an ancient story, but in our life. We want her to be born in our body, in our consciousness, in our world, in our reality. So I think there's some hints here. So, but śaktī-hīnaṃ, so Shakti disappears, not really, because everybody would die and everything ceases to exist, but Shakti as saubhāgya disappears. So Shakti here, energy, that which, and Shakti means that which is auspicious, it means life, it means prosperity, it means fertility, it means success, it means satisfaction, it means happiness. So when Devi disappears, that means no energy, no auspiciousness, no real life, no prosperity, no health, no fraternity or friendliness, no happiness, no success, no like this, you know. So it's a really bad situation. So this statement that when Shakti disappeared, everything became inauspicious. In the previous chapters, right, there's a story when Shakti was born as Sati, right? Remember I told you the immediate previous chapters about Sati. It describes the exact opposite. I don't have the verses in front of me, but I'm remembering the verses, that the gods rejoice, right? Living things became happy. Moving and unmoving things began to be, joy sprouted in everybody. The gods became happy, and prosperity, the rivers flowed and nature bloomed when Sati was born, right? Now Sati has disappeared, saubhāgya disappeared, so everything's become inauspicious, right? So let's verse 7 here. Ananda, I'll read it from this side, I can read it better. Ananda śuṣkatāṃ yātaḥ sarveṣāṃ hṛdayāntare udāsinaḥ sarva-lokāścintā-jarjara-cetasaḥ. I think. So let's see his translation. Joy shriveled up in the hearts of each and every being. All people were despondent, their careworn spirits exhausted. Swami Bhajanananda, Thakur's disciple, translated. I'll just read his translation because it gives a flavor of some of these meanings. The hearts of all embodied beings became dried up without any trace of joy. They were all burdened with anxious thoughts and remained indifferent. And so we'll play with trying to understand what this indifferent idea is. Ananda śuṣkatāṃ. So Ananda means joy, And śuṣkatāṃ means to become dry, barren, empty, right? So without joy, right? It dry. So I think he describes shriveled up. I like this term, shriveled up. When something dries up, it means if something dries up, it's not drying means the liquid and moisture leaving. The effect of that is for the thing that's the moisture is leaving becomes shriveled. So I think it's nice. It puts the description into what's the effect. It shrivels. Something drying is a cause. The effect is shriveled. I like this. I like this image very much. I mean, I don't like it. I don't wish anybody's joy to shrivel, but joy shriveled in the hearts of each and every being. Sarveṣāṃ hṛdayāntare, within sarve, in everything, in every why? Okay, jātaḥ, because, or since. Why? The joy shriveled. This is what happened. And sarveṣāṃ, everyone, hṛdayāntare, inside everyone's heart, right? So this is also giving a hint what's really happening. When Devi disappeared, the story, Devi disappeared from the external world, but here the effect is that our joy disappeared from within. So this is also giving a little bit of a psychological, moving the interpretation from just ancient mythological world creating events, mythic time of creation myth level, that happened before time and different ages and different lokas like that, to something very psychological, right? That within us, within our own heart, within our own mind, we can become, our joy can shrivel, right? And also this, we can take this as a setup, right? If for perchance your joy has shriveled in your heart, right? There may be a symptom. This may be the symptom, right? Let's see. Udasinaha sarva-lokāścintā-jarjara-cetasaḥ. Udasinaha sarva-lokāścintā-jarjara-cetasaḥ. Believe the words. So all sarva-lokāha, all people. So everyone, all people. So several things are mentioned. One is udasinaha. He translated udasana, Mackenzie Brown, as despondent. Right, that's the word that's being, and udasana has a wide variety of meanings, right? In Swami Bhajanananda, he uses the term, they remained indifferent. They remained indifferent. So we'll look at that. That's one, and you can say being indifferent and despondent are not identical, but they have a relation. We'll look into it. And they become śaktī-hīnaṃ. Chintaha means to be anxious, worried. Right, anxiety or worried is chinta, right? And jarjara means we were looking at this, shabby, forlorn, careworn, right? And I think Swami Bhajanananda, he liked this term like thrashed, right? This is kind of what it means. I sometimes like it's like a swatted fly almost. You've been beaten up, right? But what's beaten them up? Anxiety. The chintaha, right? Just beaten up anxiety. Of course, anxiety now is a major. Maybe it's always been with us, but now it seems to be more prevalent as a psychological struggle that many of us are going through. Many people go through anxiety. So you can get beaten up and thrashed. It's a great word, thrashed, right? Cetasaḥ, their mind, their consciousness, their awareness. Right, it's so interesting because consciousness and awareness is pure and unsullied, actually, right? But because it's reflected on or through the instrument of the mind, if the mind is agitated, consciousness seems agitated, the awareness seems agitated, right? So even though it may actually not be, it may be pure and unadulterated, that's not the experience. It experiences itself as agitated, right? And it says udasana. Udasana here, like I said, it means he's translated as despondent. When things are horrible and one is beaten up and one and just full of anxiety, full of worry, right? One response, of course, despondent, you can be because depressed, despondent, give up hope, right? But udasinata, it also, it's like when I first read this, I read the translation a long time ago, and I can talk on that, no problem. I understand the meaning. But then we began to analyze the Sanskrit, Udasana is such an interesting word to use because I like this word, right? There's a sampradaya, a lineage called Udasana Sampradaya. They're the descendants, the spiritual descendants of one of an ascetic yogi son of Guru Nanak, right? So connected to the Sikh tradition. He had several children became like sadhus, and one of them is named Baba Sri Chand. And so his sampradaya, either the sampradaya he started or the sampradaya he joined, and therefore became the luminary of that sampradaya, is known as Udasanas, the Udasans. And it's important to us because we have many friends in our sadhu world, in my sadhu world in India, at our Guru's ashram in Allahabad, Prayag. Many of our sadhu friends are Udasans, right? We hang out with Udasans a lot, right? We like Udasans. And we're more likely to march with the Udasans to take our bath at a Kumbh Mela than with the Nagababas of our Akadas, right? Their temperament suits us better, I think, like that. So we're friendly with them. And there, the word Udasan means they're uninterested, right? They're unconcerned, right? And that's different because there's another group of sadhus, of tapasvis, right? That in the Vaishnava Sampradaya coming from Ramananda. There's about 6 or 7 different important lineages coming from Swami Ramananda, who was a great Vaishnava ascetic reformer. And one of them, they call them Tyagis. And there's another sect called Mahatyagis. And Tyagi means renunciants, the renouncers, right? And so it means like they give things up. Mahatyagis, they really give things up. They're very austere, right? So that's a powerful thing to like, no, just get just throw it. They give it up, right? Forcibly give it up. And Udasan also gives it up, right? Not because they have to take it and push it away, because they're not interested, right? They've withdrawn their mind or they've lost interest. It's lost maybe the object that some have to push away, or most of us grab, some push away. They are not that interested. Either they've outlived the attraction, or by spiritual understanding, or by a higher taste. There's a beautiful verses in the Bhagavad Gita that describes like one may give up the object to the senses. The senses can be withdrawn from the object of the senses. That's kind of a tyagi type of renunciation. But still, the taste still's there, right? But one experiences a higher taste, a higher experience, then the lower things or other things lose their interest or draw. That's udasan, right? But so this is not that, right? Because that's a good quality, to be unattached, to be uninterested in worldly things. That's a sign of spirit. That's considered a spiritual sign. Those who are trying to do, connecting verses, you can look in the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 12, verse 16. There is the Udasana verse, right? That I'll read the English because my tongue's gonna get tied right now. He who is free from want, pure, expert, unconcerned, and free from pain, renouncing all undertakings and commencements, he who is thus devoted to me is dear to me. This is a series where Lord Krishna says, such and such, who is dear to me. It's a beautiful poetic litany. One who's like this, that person is especially dear to me. Well, everyone's dear to me. I'm equal to everybody. But some people, certain types of people are extremely dear to me, right? Even though I'm equal to everybody, some people are dear to me. And so this is one verse, right? So what are the qualities? He who is free from want, who is pure, it says, anapekshaha, suchihi, pure, daksha, expert, udasino, unconcerned, gatov, yātaḥ, and free from pain. Right, so one who does not suffer in pain, right? Who has no pain, who's expert at everything, who's pure, who's free from want. That person, as another quality of this list of divine qualities, right, is unconcerned, unattached, unmotivated by. So that's udasana. So the three worlds, all living beings, and all that after joy has shriveled in their hearts, and they're thrashed by anxiety, they're also unconcerned. can also be unconcerned. It's obviously not the same thing. It may look the same. Somebody who's not motivated with anything in the world, right, could be so because they've outlived it, or they have something higher, or they're just not interested, or something like this, or a higher, a deeper perception, right? Or it could be things are so bad, and I'm suffering so much, I just give up, right? I'm not interested. I'm not even going to gauge. And so maybe in our updated, we can update this with almost like depression, a lack of motivation, like that because of suffering. And that's a very legitimate response. I mean, somewhat so it's mentioned here in the scriptures, like when joy shrivels up and just full of worry, you can just become unmotivated. Here it says despondent, or just unattached and uninterested. So that's that verse. If you want to look it up, it's like chapter 12, verse 16. It's a very beautiful verse. In discussion, this term udasana has been in since we were working on it a couple weeks ago. So Mimikan and myself we've had many conversations. We've come back to this again and again because we love this term, right? And we love that verse in the Bhagavad Gita, and we love the udasanas, and just really thinking about it because it looks, this type of udasana, udasanata, can look just like the divine quality of udasanata, right? But there is a huge difference, right? And the Swami Ambikananda reminded us of a beautiful image given by Swami Shivananda Saraswati from the Divine Life Society, that if you take a top and spin it like a dreidel or something, like that. If you take a top and you don't do anything to it, it's just sitting on the ground, it's not moving. That is, it's tamasic. It's just not moving. It's inert. But if it's spinning perfectly, it's spinning so quickly you don't see it move. It looks like it's still, right? But it's not tamasic, right? So he said that's the difference between sattva and tamas. It can look the same. It's so equipoised. It's not unbalanced and passionate like Rajaguna. But to be sattvic requires so much attention, so much balance, so much refinement for the sattva guna, where tamas guna is just stopped and laying on the side. To the outsider, to the external eye, it may look the same. So depression and renunciation or unattachment may look the same, but they're not the same thing. They're very different, right? We were talking about the three types of vision, I think. That's an interesting point also, Swamiji mentioned, that kind of discussing different verses in Bhagavad Gita, says like there's different visions. In the tamasic vision, which I think most of our listeners here today in our group know the term sattva, rajas, and sattva. In a sattvic vision, it's hard to let's give choose some definitions just for the sake of discussion. Sattvic vision is although seeming to see the many, one sees the one. Let's just use that as a way of concentration, like about concentration, right? And a Rajasic vision is to see many things, right? In a certain sense, seeing many instead of the one, not seeing the big picture or the essential. See many, you're distracted. That's a vision that's Rajasic. A vision that's tamasic, sattvic is to either see the whole or to see the essence, see the one and the many. And then the tamasic vision, Swami just mentioned, is seeing only one thing. Like a myopic vision, obsessed with one thing. That's not the same as seeing the one. Seeing only one thing is not the same as seeing the one, right? So in the same way, or in a similar way, being unattached and unmotivated is not the same as, due to depression, right? Is not the same as being unmotivated and renounced or unattached because of a profound spiritual understanding and maturity. We'll leave it at that. So all people were udasana, despondent, their careworn spirits exhausted, right? Not bad. Oh, very bad, sorry. It is very bad. Don't do that, right? But why? Because Shakti, The saubhāgya shakti, shakti as saubhāgya, the shakti was no longer obvious. So we're not, I'm not qualified, I'm not by temperament and by training and qualification, I'm not qualified to give any psychological advice and perspective or analysis, right? But this verse may be showing that the cause, one of a spiritual cause, right? There may be very specific real world causes, but a spiritual behind the scene cause of depression and anxiety like that is not seeing the auspicious one in our life and in our world, in living and non-living things, and therefore not having joy in the heart. And that is called, we could perhaps say that. So therefore, a joyless heart, right, means in this verse a joyless heart, and thus the accompanying anxiety, thrashed by anxiety and detachment, or like this, right, is a means bereft of, not of Shakti, but of Devi, right? When we're not conscious, it's a symptom of joyless heart means no Devi, right? So more joy, more Devi. This is it's real simple, maybe overly simplified, but that's what this. They don't have Devi, they're suffering. What's going to happen? They're going to get Devi, and their suffering will come to an end. I'm just giving the whole thing away. Not only the Devi Gita away, I'm giving the big picture away, the whole thing, right? The real Devi Bhagavatam is life, the universe, and everything, right? And therefore, anxieties, dejection, etc., are symptoms of the lack of this Devi. Let's see how we get her back. Verse. I think I skipped a verse 8. Sada duko dadho magna roga grastas tada bhavan grahanam devatanam cha vaipari tyena vartanam. Sada dukkha dadho magna. Sada dukkha dadho magna. This is one term. These three words come together. These four words come together. Sada, always, ever, right? Dukkha, suffering. Dadho, it means placed, but the idea of placed in like you put something in water or something like that. Placed, plunged, something like that. Placed like that. And then magna means immersed, engrossed, plunged, this combination like that. So it means ever drowning or plunged or in the sea, the ocean of suffering. Then ever drowning in the sea of misery is the translation we have here, right? Roga grastaha tada bhavan. Roga means disease, right? So dukkha means suffering in general, and roga means disease, right? And grasta, tormented, absorbed, consumed, right? Tada bhavan. They became, who became? Those whose hearts shriveled, joy disappeared. They were full of anxiety and lack of interest in anything. They were always suffering in an ocean, drowning in an ocean or sea of suffering, and consumed by, tormented by, is I think a better term, by disease, right? We'll just do this half verse, and then we'll move on to the second part, because drowning in sorrow and disease. So that's another way of saying that is drowning in sorrow and disease, right? They're drowning so that they're consumed by disease and drowning in misery. That's drowning in suffering, disease. So that again, being careful not to overstep our profession, right? But as per this verse, our suffering, if we're suffering, and our disease, these are symptomatic of the lack of saubhāgya, right? Of the Devi's direct presence. And we find in the Chandi, we read this verse in the Devi Mahatmyam in our a couple of classes ago. in our Hindu goddess class, we're talking about the Chandi, that one of the first things that Meda says when asked about who is this Mahamaya, right? No, well, the first part of the Brahma, in the Brahma Sutti, Brahma's prayers, it says that you are in the heart. In that prayer, yeah, I think so, or the second. Anyway, one of the hymns. I'm getting the verses jumbled in my head, but the meaning I know. It says you are joy and auspiciousness and health and prosperity in the homes of the good and the righteous and the pious, and you are suffering disease and poverty in the house of the wicked. We can overdo this. We know there's many causes of joy, many causes of wickedness, and many causes of poverty, and sometimes we don't want to bypass the fact that some people are poor because people make them poor and things like that. We're talking big picture, karmic, larger principles than the details of how we live our life and how badly some of us live with each other. That could be causes of suffering and disease and poverty like this. But still, saubhāgya equals Devi's presence, felt presence, embodied presence, as sati, right? As truth, satya also means truth, and sati also means truth, it's important to remember, is health, is health and beauty and life and auspiciousness and joy. And when she withdraws, suffering, disease, like this, right? Then it says, grahanam devatanam cha, then the term is vaiparityena, reversed, right? So grahanam means planets, the planets, and devata. Devatanam is the gods, right? So gods and planets are reversed, right? There's several mantras we know that in the Devi, for Kali, there's this term, this Vaiparityena, is we're familiar with this term as backwards. Everything is opposite, right? Reverse, right? So when planets are reversed, this has always been, I've seen 4 or 5 translations of this verse, and it always refers to in retrograde, right? So I think she says retrograded ominously. It doesn't directly say that. It simply says they're reversed. Their normal course or their normal, and of course, what meant, if you don't know, in astronomy and astrology, a planet in its elliptical, planets are moving at different speeds, and from our perspective, sometime a planet will seem, from our perspective, to move backwards on its course. So a planet can move forward, and then from our perspective, due to all the things moving, the planet will seem to move backward. That's called retrograde. Many of you heard, what is it? Mercury is in retrograde when communication and electronics go bad and like that. You can blame it on Mercury in retrograde. That's believed to be that. And so ancient, in Hindu astrology and Jyotish, they understood what a retrograde meant. They knew, there's evidence that they knew of the way planets were, that they were circular, they're spherical, they're moving around the sun at different times. And so they understood, seems to be, from evidence I've seen, this is not my specialty, but they understood the idea of retrograde. But imagine if you didn't, and some forms of astrology maybe didn't, right? Astronomy, early astronomy didn't. And so when you see everything's moving perfectly in this incredible pattern, you're watching patterns, predictable patterns, and all of a sudden a planet starts moving the other direction. Well, that can't be good. That's very, and so there, and so astrologically, that's considered a really inauspicious omen, right? When a planet moves retrogrades, right? So, so it could have been, I mean, if you put it in historical, maybe at a certain point, maybe we can find out which planets were moving retrograde and date this text. I don't think enough information is given for that, and maybe not meant to be taken in that way, right? But planets moving backwards, and sometimes maybe planets did move backwards. Think about this. Think of the feeling what this is when everything goes wrong, right? And everything gets lost, and everything looks inauspicious. Everything is against you, right? You look up, the stars are bad. I'm Swami Ramakrishna, one of the great swamis that came to this country.
Actually, he also came, I'm not going to tell you where I am, but he's came to this country too, I think. But he came to America in 1903, 1904, like that, a very hero of our line, Swami Ramatirtha. But he one time says that when you're living to truth and you're connected and you're conscious of your Godhead and you're devoted to truth and to God and you're like this and yourself, then it says everything's for you. And he would go into these ecstatic raptures. He says like he was so identified that with the God within him that everything was serving him, not just him personally, but the Godhead in him, not Ramatirtha, Rama. The one who is in this person called Ramatirtha is Rama himself, right? And he says, like, if it could rain, the clouds have come to bathe, to do abhishekam of me. And the wind has come to dry him afterward. You know, it's like he saw, and imagine that state where everything was for you. Everything was, every detail, a bird has come to entertain me, right? You know, it's like, maybe the bird is just there and it's just raining. But with that, when you're so attuned to divinity, you see everything divinely, right? Then he says that when you're doing wrong and you know you're doing wrong and you're being untruthful and impure and honest and selfish, everything goes against you. It says like, it seems like every blade of grass stands up to poke you, to stop you from your path, right? It seems like and all that's changed is your attitude and your intention, right? When things are bad, everything looks bad, right? And I remember Swami Swahananda, who's a previous head at the of the Ramakrishna Center, Ramakrishna Mission Center in Hollywood. I haven't heard him speak many times, but when I was in high school, I heard him speak. And he mentioned everything is in the mind. He says, if you give a little child is in a good mood and you slap his face, he laughs or she laughs. If a child's in a bad mood, you give him candy, he cries or she cries, right? Everything is in the like that. So it's like, at a certain point, everything looks bad. The planets seem to be going, maybe they're moving backward, maybe it's actual sign of some horrible thing when Shakti disappears, or it's just everything looks bad, everything is against you. And it says, and then the gods also went backwards. So that's how he put it, the fortunes of the gods decline. Because the gods, their nature is to have saubhāgya on their side, right? This is, I believe it's a reference to a very early story. It's also told in the Devi Bhagavatam, so it's not unreasonable to connect it to. When, and in Srimad Bhagavatam also, the same story is there, slightly different, told little different details. That Lakshmi, the Devi as auspiciousness, she originally lived in heaven with Indra, right? And when she lived in heaven with Indra, right, the gods prospered because she's luck, she's success, she's auspiciousness. But then Indra, due to some Indra often gets into some trouble because being king of the gods and lord of heaven, it's easy to get egotistical. And Durvasa gave him a garland from Lord Vishnu, and he disrespected the garland. And Durvasa, being an angry sage, if you don't know who he is, all you need to know he's an angry sage, and who easily curses people. But a curse of a sage always does good ultimately. Right? So he cursed him, and he says, may Shri leave you. Shri is another name for Lakshmi, another name for saubhāgya, which means Lakshmi left the gods, heaven, left Indra, which in other words saying favor, luck, fortune left them, right? In which case they became unlucky, and their antithesis, their enemies, their counterparts, the asuras, Suras and asuras, the gods and the demons began to move up because Lakshmi left the realm of the gods, and therefore the demons easily came up and they lost their position. And there's a whole thing of the churn of the ocean, that whole story of Shiva drinking the poison that comes from that scene. But it's a very similar thing that when when it says the fortune of the gods decline, the gods' nature is to have saubhāgya, to have fortune on their side. That's what they're auspicious, and they keep everything moving auspiciously. But they became inauspicious. They lost their power. They lost their strength. They lost their nerve. They lost their position, right? Just like the planets look bad, the nature, the heavens, everything looked bad. Everything was bad, right? Then, ever drowned in a sea of misery, they were consumed by disease. The planets retrograded ominously. The fortune of the gods declined. Again, before moving to the next verse, drowning in an ocean of disease is a symptom of this withdrawal of Shakti, or loss of Shakti. So, next verse. I have to, excuse me, there's a lot of, the Devi Bhagavatam has, Gita, Devi Bhagavatam has a lot of long run-on words because of Sandhi. I'll pull it apart. I can't pronounce that in one go, so I have to pull it apart. Adibhauta, adidaivanam, right? And so it means adibhauta means material, right? And dealing with material things, concerning material things. And adidaivanam means spiritual or concerning spiritual things, right? So it says, kings too suffered misfortune due to the material and spiritual forces set in motion by the deaths of sati, right? So in the material world, material causes, as well as deeper spiritual causes, right? Like the loss of the god's power and the planets like this, right? The kings began to lose their as a nripa, they weren't nripa abhavan. The kings became they lost their fortune, just like the gods. Everything became misfortune. So kings who suffered misfortune. In the aparajita stuti, I think aparajita stuti of the Devi Mahatmyam, that Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Vishnumayati Sapsita Namastasya, those verses. One of the opening setup verses, I don't think I wrote it down here. I don't think I did. But it says, you are the fortune and misfortune of kings. It's in the first 3 or 4 verses of that, of Aparajita Stuti, if you want to look it up. You, O Devi, are the fortune and misfortune of kings. Here, she's the misfortune, so let's put the two together. Her presence is the fortune of kings. Her withdrawal is the misfortune of kings. Right, and kings, of course, too much focus on one person, but kings represent the kingdom, or and to use this term, and it means the people. So when a king's fortune, when a king thrives, the people thrive. And the kings are this is the idea, especially in the old world, is very much considered like this. Actually, in South India, most of these very ancient, beautiful Shiva temples, from the Shaiva Siddhanta tradition, based upon the Kamika Agamas like that, these beautiful temples. I think we mentioned this a few days ago in one of our other classes, that that the purpose of the pujas are the purpose of all these elaborate rites. Their primary purpose is that the king should stay successful, because a successful king means peace in the land, and prosperity in the land, and safety in the land. We could push back against now, of course. We have there's more than one way to run a world and a government, and to organize ourselves, right? But but so when kings suffered, everyone declined, right?
Both lines of this verse remind me in the Arthurian legend, when King Arthur dies, it describes how the entire kingdom, the trees start wilting, rivers.
Can you hear somebody? His microphone's not on. You're going to hear my. So I'll tell the stuff. It says in the Arthurian legend, when King Arthur dies, right, the trees wilt, right, and everything becomes, something like that. The whole land dries up,
because he is
right?
the kingdom.
Because the king is the kingdom, right? And so that's not our normal way of thinking of, but that is a very Indic Hindu way of understanding. The king is the kingdom. When the king suffers, the kingdom also suffers like that. And actually, many of ancient rites throughout most of the ancient world, right, part of the replenishing and bringing prosperity and fertility to the land usually involved the king doing things to represent prosperity to the land, like this. The king planting the first rice, because the king, and like this. So there's a lot of ancient themes in this. But kings lost their fortune. They also suffered misfortune due to the material world, material things going bad, and spiritual things going bad. This term, adibhautic and adidaivanam, right? Material and spiritual. Maybe you're familiar with these. You'll find this term used throughout the Puranic literature, throughout the Mahabharata. It's a very common term. These common terms also mention the Bhagavad Gita, and revealing like an example of this is like suffering can come from three sources. Very often is how people remember these three terms. Right, for instance, the adi-daivika klesha, adi-daivika meaning concerning divine things, spiritual things, means, and so when we suffer, sometimes we suffer due to the gods. So that, how we say that, by natural catastrophe, by famine, big things, earthquake, things are by fate, by the gods, right? Some spiritual thing we can't fully understand. Then adi bhautika klesha, suffering caused by other living beings, and adhyatmika, caused by our own self, our own psychology and things like that, right? But so these terms you'll find throughout. But here it says, the king suffered misfortune due to material and spiritual forces set in motion by Sati's death specifically, right? Death, of course, Sati in the story died, but Sati can't die because so what does Sati mean? So Sati's death, let's put it like an equation. Sati's death means no Sati, right? Not actual, but like the non-existence in somebody's life. And so we have to understand a little bit of the etymologically what Sati means. Satya Tvat, Sati. Satya Twat is Sati. Sati is she who is the nature of truth, right? So, of course, Sati here means we Shakti and energy and auspiciousness like that. But let's pull it back even at a more profound psychological and philosophical level. Truth is Sati. Satya, comes to Satya, right? Satya Tat iti Sati. Sati is Satya Twat, that which is the nature of Satya, truthfulness. Truth meaning a couple different ways. Truth means that what is, right? But also means truthfulness, right? When somebody speaks the truth, when they're being truthful, it means they're speaking what is. So it means what is, and us aligning and affirming and living and speaking the truth, right? So I mean, there's commentary along these lines also to other places of the story, that Sati's disappearance is when the world loses its focus on truth. And this is also a symptom of various ages, right? And so Sri Ramakrishna said that Satya is the austerity of Kali Yuga, right? In the opening scenes of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Vaishnava text, there's a very powerful scene where King Parikshit who's a part of the story too, goes on a roundabout to see the known world, to see what's happening in his kingdom, because he sees things a little bit weird, right? A few weird symptoms that are happening in his kingdom. So he said maybe when Krishna left his body, when Krishna withdrew his physical presence, maybe just like Krishna disappearing, things got bad. Here, Sati disappearing, things got bad. Maybe Kali Yuga started, and he notices. So he goes around. He sees a horrendous sight where the demon Kali is beating a cow and a bull. The cow, then the story stops and it gives a little commentary, gives an interpretive commentary in the story itself, in the original verses, that the cow is Mother Earth and the bull is Dharma. And the bull of Dharma, of righteousness, of religion, of religiosity, of duty, is on 4 legs. And if I get these right, if I don't get it right, please forgive me, is one of them is Satya, honesty, then is Saucha, purity, then is compassion, Karuna, and I'm missing one, honesty, purity, this is bad, it's only 4. Austerity, tapasya, and austerity, right? Self-control. These 4 legs of the bull, all right, represent the 4 pillars of dharma, right? Purity or cleanliness, honesty, austerity, self-control, and compassion, right? And he says that in the story, the demon Kali, who's the personification of the Kali Yuga, right, had broken the legs of three legs, right? So purity was gone, austerity was gone, and compassion was gone, right? But the one leg was tottering, and that was honesty or truthfulness, right? And we lie, and everyone's lying to each other. But the reason we are so upset when we catch somebody lying to us, right? Our dearest friend or our leaders and religious and political leaders, is because we expect the truth. Maybe we shouldn't, but we should expect the truth, right? It's a given, even though it's breaking. And so as long as you hold on to truth, Dharma, it's the last leg of Dharma, right? So here, perhaps kings, maybe leaders themselves have given up truth. Sati has died, has gone, has disappeared from the lives of kings.
Alex is asking, does the death of Sati represent the breaking of the fourth leg?
So the question Alex asks is, what does the death of Sati represent the breaking of the fourth leg? Where, of course, the breaking of the fourth leg is a different story, but yes, I think this is one way, and I'm not the only one who said this. This is in the commentaries and other. As far as I know, the commentary on Devi Gītā doesn't mention that specifically. Maybe it does, because I think it points out this satyatvat, that sati means nature of truth. But I know in other versions which have been more commentaries, like on the Srimad Bhagavatam, where the story of Sati is also told, ancient commentators have mentioned that this means a break of when you lose truth, right? And both as a divine quality in the human personality to hold on to truth and be truthful, right? But also when you lose truth and when you don't know what's what, you lose we no longer see the truth. Well, to speak of not trying to be truthful, we no longer see the reality, right? When you don't see the reality, then everything goes bad, right? You can't be truthful if you don't know the truth, right? So both ontological truth as well as the personal commitment to speaking the truth and doing the truth and being truthful. So Sri Ramakrishna really emphasized truth is the austerity of this age. He quoted a very favorite quote of his of Tulsidas Goswami from I think it's in his Ramayana, but it may be in another. He wrote some other poems also, but I think it's in his version of Ramayana, where he says, if speaking only the truth, and then treating other men's wives, from the man's perspective, other men's wives as mother, seeing other men's wives as mother, mean not lustfully, right, does not get you liberation. If speaking the truth and seeing other people purely, let's make a general principle. The verse is seeing another man's wife as mother rather than as object of lust, right? If these two things are not sufficient to get you liberation, then let the entire world know that Tulsidas is a liar. He based his entire reputation on this one verse. You can stop chanting Hanuman Chalisa, stop reading Ramayana, his version, and his songs like that. He bases everything. These two things, a pure vision, and both of these are sati, right? To see women purely, or to see each other purely, to expand the concept, right? And without lust, right? Without selfish lust, right? And to speak the truth. If that doesn't get us heaven, that doesn't get us liberation, nothing's going to get us heaven. Then we give up these ideas where we're in a fantasy world. We should just I'll have to get a real job. I'm just telling you. If that happens. Yes, tell me.
Does this introduction then represent the previous Kali Yuga?
Question is, does this introduction represent a previous Kali Yuga? It might. It could be another. I have to see, because then you have to look at the Devi Bhagavatam and this category of text and the myth, the cycles of myth, really mentally broadly. And I can't keep all the Devi Bhagavatam is so complicated that I can't see the big picture just now. But it's an interesting idea. It may represent the cause of a because actually it's a little different. In Kali Yuga happens on earth, right? And this is, although I mentioned the three worlds and kings become inauspicious and lose their, but the core of the story is going to happen. It's being talked about the heavenly realms, right? So it's a little bit, and I'll think about this and get. I have to look at the cycle of the cycle of myth being told here, the non-pejorative use of the term myth, right? So kings too suffered misfortune due to material and spiritual forces set in motion by the death of Sati, right? Okay, yeah, okay, with the second half of the verse at least. So, what did it say? I'll look at Atasmin neva, what is it? Atasmineva kaletu tara kakyo mahasuraha. Asmin eva, then something happened. Asmin, this happened. Eva, Kali, at this time, when did it, what something bad's about to happen, right? At this time, in other words, by here at this time is because of this, another way you can think of it, right? When the planets are retrograding, the gods have lost their power, joy has shriveled in the hearts of humans, right? Everyone sees, everybody is thrashed and beaten up by anxiety. Everybody's lost their gumption and their joy and their motivation and life. The kings have lost their fortune, both materially and spiritually. Sati is gone. Because of this, when such a situation comes, right, if that's the stage, nothing good, I mean, eventually something good comes. We always say, oh, something good always comes out of this. Something good eventually does come out of this, right? But the immediate, when things look really bad, you have to think, what's coming, right? What's brewing, right? You know, in such an environment, something nasty can come up, right? Because we're at our lowest, we're at our spiritual weakest, we're at our least conscious, our least loving, our least joyful, our least communal. You can start putting all these terms into it, right? So now, at this time, there arose, right, a great demon, Mahasura, named Taraka. Right, so at this time, when everything was at its darkest, a demon was born, and a demon arose, right? We can see this, you know, when we see even our friends and devotees and friends suffering, and all these like that, and you often wonder, you worry, like, I hope, you know, it's like something, they're weak and they're down, right? And they don't have support, and they don't see support, and you think, what's going to happen? What's coming, right? And so sometimes bad things can happen in such a situation, and it can come from many sources. Sometimes because we're not paying attention and we're self-absorbed or lack of attention, lack of, they can literally be external things take advantage of us, or we're not paying attention and we don't like realize there's got a flood coming or a fire is coming. We can not pay attention because we don't have the mental energy and the mood to do so. And we can, but sometimes also, and some people can be also great monstrous people can take advantage of people when they're down, right? And so the demons could also be like, there's people who behave like demons, right? But also sometimes lower things can come up, right? Our lower inclinations or unrefined aspects, or lust, anger, greed, jealousy, hatred, pride. These are the classic internal demons that are given, right? Delusion, selfishness, all these things can come up as personal demons, or externally they could be great selfish, cruel, despotic people. And we see this, I mean, we're watching this in real life right now, unfortunately, right? There can be real external negative forces, but as well as, or independent of, or similarly, we can also have internal demons. So the demons that come up in these stories, with demon tales in a certain sense, and a common theme between in the Chandi and the Devi Mahatma, there's all these important stories where demons have come up, right? The gods have got complacent, they lost their Shri, the demons have come up, taken control, kicked the gods out of heaven, they lost it. So this is the same story. told, it's a different version of the same type of story, not the same story. It's a different story, but the same type of story. Again and again, the gods lose their place, right? A demon comes up, and usually what happens, the demon comes up and becomes really strong. He takes over hell and becomes the main demon, right? Then humans are easy to overcome humans, right? And then gets enough strength and maybe a few boons under his belt, and he can attack heaven and get rid of the gods. And all of a sudden you have a demon who may be a minor, insignificant energy, something in psychologically or externally. And how did that person or that tendency or that thought or something get so powerful that it seems to take over everything, right? So such demons, in such moments, in moments of great suffering, caused by loss of that the withdrawal of the embodied sacred being, right? Great calamities personified can come up internally as well as externally. Let's see what time it is now. It's 8 o'clock, right? It's 8:20? Okay, we'll stop there. So I will mention that this story, the story of Taraka, next week we'll tell the story of Taraka a little bit more, but we don't have to tell the story too much because in this text it's barely told. I want you to know it, right? Because it's told in 1.5 verses, right? The whole story of Taraka, and he has a long backstory and how he got a boon and So we'll get the way it's told is almost sufficient. You could read the next couple verses of the boon that he got, that he only be killed by the son of Shiva, and we'll understand what that means. But it's told as a very quick bridge to justify the gods doing tapasya in the Himalayas, the Devi appearing as this great light. That's remember the first question of the whole first verses, what happened about when this great light appeared, right? And then that great light will take the form of Bhuvaneshwari, and then will teach the Devi Gita. So it's this little moment of Taraka Sutta told in 1.5 verses will get us really quickly, hopefully, to the main theme of the main story that's going to be told. So we'll leave it at that on this holy day of Shitala Saptami. Thank you for your kind attention. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji ki Jai, Jai Mahamayi ki Jai, Jai Swamiji Maharaj Ji ki Jai, Jai Ma Dakshineshwari Bhavatarni Dakshinakali ki Jai, Jai Devi Bhuvaneshwari ki Jai, Jai Shitala Devi ki Jai. Are there any questions or comments before? Ashley.
What does Taraka mean?
Ashley's asking, what does Taraka mean?
Yeah, she also has demon, star.
Yeah, so she probably did. The fact that she said demon, star, or literally 20 minutes before we turned on the computer, we were looking up like, what is it? Taraka? I mean, Taraka means star. That's what Taraka means, right? Taraka means like and there's a story. That's what I was. Maybe I don't know how much to go into because she doesn't go much into the story of who Taraka's parents are, who his brothers are. We'll tell the story. But what is his name is not necessarily an auspicious. You mentioned a few things other than that besides star. Yeah, it was part of our conversation, and we rushed down to this house.
Rescuing, liberating.
So Taraka also means to rescue or to liberate. The word Tara comes from it. Tara, goddess Tara, is both star and that which crosses and liberates and frees us, right? So it's interesting that Taraka is one who liberates, but here referring to a demon. So we'll
also in like a sense like Bhavatarini or like a deliverer.
Yeah. So even the name like the Kali at Dakshineshwar is Bhavatarini, one who delivers one from fear and from rebirth like this. So that Tarini is there. So we'll investigate a little more as we tell the story of the demon Taraka. Maybe a little bit of the meaning will come, right? I've not seen just like, oh, he's named Taraka because of one of these like a direct reason. He's called. He's told. I mean, his story is told in Mahabharata. Maybe I can look in other texts, right, where maybe why he was given that name. There's other texts. His story is told in Skanda Purana, right? It's only 96,000 verses, so it's a little bit, maybe I can look it up, right? Mahabharata is 100,000 verses, Skanda Purana is like 96,000 verses, right? But the story would be there, maybe it's told right off.
It seems to be like the connection of like crossing.
Yeah, so Tara means to cross,
Maybe
right?
like Tarakosha.
Yeah, but that's, how does it relate to
Yeah,
it? But what are the mean, but my question is, why is it the name of a demon? Yeah, so, what it means I know, what is the name of the, why is it the demon named Taraka? That's a mystery to me, but maybe it's there. Any other? Anybody, if you want, you can unmute yourself and ask directly. I have to look at,
What is the?
Let me go
Carolyn
move on.
was asking, what is the meaning of Mahasati performing yoginina?
what is it?
Or what is the meaning of Mahasati performing yoginina?
Oh, Yoga Yajna, yeah. Oh, so the question is Ellen asked that? Ellen asked that? Okay. Carolyn, you're asking, what is the meaning of Sati performing Yoga Yajna? Yoga Yajna?
Yeah, like why did she decide to consume herself with fire? I mean, maybe not
Yeah.
why, but there could have been so many. Is there some significance behind that?
So one of the questions, actually, Ellen asked, Ellen asked this question, in the Google Classroom also, did she burn herself in fire? Did she jump in the fire, of Daksha's fire, or did she consume herself in a yogic type of fire, right? So in the Devi Bhagavatam, it mentions this yoga yajna, that in a fire, in a yajna, a yogic yajna. So not necessarily, so giving a little hint that it's not just the external fire. Some version of the story, because I said the story is a very ancient story, it's told throughout the ancient literature. Some versions have the fire sacrifice that he was doing, that Daksha was doing, that she jumped in that fire sacrifice itself, in that fire, right, and then burned herself. The question is, what did Shiva carry around? If she burned her body, how did she carry her body? So that also means that earliest versions of the stories don't have Shiva carrying the body. And so you have later stories carrying the body, even later stories having the body cut up and falling to earth, make śaktī-hīnaṃ, because there needs to be the idea of the śaktī-hīnaṃ. We'll mention that on Sunday. Some of the śaktī-hīnaṃs, probably the śaktī-hīnaṃ structure of temples in India probably predate the tradition of the sati story, or the connection of the sati story to like this, right? The way of connecting the two, right? These are ancient temples on their own. Most of them were ancient temples on their own before they got connected to the sati Daksha myth, right? But some have her just in her own, her Bhut Agni or Atma Agni, she internally awoken a yogic fire or a yogic sacrifice, right? And therefore consumed her body, right? Different texts will say differently, right? You can see the yogic one is in a certain sense more interesting. That we also have a Bhut Agni, we have a fire of her own awareness, or a fire. She awakened this divine energy within her body and consumed it. We also have the same Bhut Agni. What is it? The Bhut Agni is that which gives life, right? In Vedic tradition, we worship the fire Vaishvanada, right? Vaishvanada is a name for Agni, the fire. And we especially, in our Baba tradition, we identify the fire of Arduni, and like that was Vaishvanada, right? He's the fire that's not just, there's different ways, fire is in different things, there's fire in everything. This is the fire that's in living things, right? And the universal fire that's in all, in other words, it's prana, it's energy, it's shakti. Right, so that when we light the fire in the Duni, it represents Kundalini, it means awareness, it means life, it means prana, it's all these multiple levels. So she is that Shakti, right? And so she when that Shakti comes up, when that really comes up, maybe a way that can maybe interpreted, when that Shakti comes up, body consciousness appears. There's a part of the story we haven't mentioned in the Daksha story. Daksha so offends her, because the struggle is that Shiva is so other, is so beyond proper behavior of society, right? Like Daksha represents the Brahminical culture, civilization that he was the father of, as per the stories, as a Prajapati, right? And in all the stories, she's constantly struggling because she wants Shiva, right? But she can't have Shiva because she's Dakshini. She's Dakshayani. She's the daughter of Daksha, right? Another one of her names, right? Means she's the product of human culture and therefore human morality, human restrictions, right? So she says, in some of the versions, she says, I can never really be Shiva's Shakti while I'm your daughter. In other words, while I'm human, or while I'm part of human culture or human morality in those structures, right? And therefore, the only way I have to stop being I have to give up the body, which, in other words, she went, so and the way the story has been interpreted a little bit mystically is that this represents that as long as we're in we have body consciousness, take a little psychologically, with body consciousness, we can never fully be with Shiva. We have to go beyond body consciousness. So that's another interpretation of her burning the body in yoga by awakening prana, like that the body idea falls off, or the physical body falls off, and now she's reborn in a new body as Parvati, right? That's not connected to a human. Is not the daughter of Daksha, the first patriarch of Vedic Brahmanism, right? You know, like now she's a daughter of the mountain, of the earth, right? A more primal form that's closer and less restricted. Because of all the things you could be daughters of, right, or be born from, a human being had a lot of limitations, right? A lot of restrictions, you know, especially when it's a human being with high culture, like, and rules, and so that's, and Shiva in many of these stories, in the story of Daksha, Shiva and Sati, is the unfettered, unconditioned consciousness, right? And Daksha represents the fully fettered and conditioned human consciousness, behavior, and Sati is somewhere in between. So there's that struggle between those two extremes. Sati eventually realized it was impossible, and she tried to make it work, and there was a reason why she was born in this family, right? Some boons and all kinds of stuff, and to satisfy all kinds of things, but it couldn't have been permanent. And actually, in the story in the Devi Bhagavatam, when Sati leaves for the fire sacrifice, Shiva says, "We weren't invited. We're not going to." She's doing it just to insult us. Why go? No, I want to go. He says, "Okay, you can go." He didn't say you can't go, because in the big picture, he knew why she was born as Sati, and she knows that although it hurts him very much, he's attached to her, and you see what happened when she left her body to him and to the world. But it's not a permanent form. To be born in a human she's born as a human. Sati is a human, right? A human being can't hold it forever, right? You know that she's a human incarnation of Adi Shakti. So she needed a more cosmic incarnation that could and has a bigger thing. But I'll leave it at that. That okay, Carolyn? Something? Okay.
Swamiji,
Yes, tell me, Heather. Yes.
I was wondering, there's this story seems to be, I know that like with the subtle anatomy class and everything, things were like, there's like
Yes.
a macrocosm and a microcosm, like the internal and the larger external.
Yeah.
Is there like a micro internal
Yeah.
microcosmic story of is this also something that's symbolic of what's happening internally or down here?
Yeah, that's exactly, I think the point is the macro and micro interpretations are important, and macro is also on two levels. One is it's dealing with we have to take the stories also respectfully as ancient world stories as they're told, right? The original form of the stories, and talking about in very ancient time. This is mythic time, prehistory. We don't know how to speak about these things except in the language of these myths, right? But that these are cosmic forces of cosmic deities that happened a long time. Let me tell you an ancient tale. This happened a long time ago. People told a really old story about the before time, you know, before when the world was young, and you know the whole thing, right? So it's that type of thing, and then it's macro in the sense that it's dealing with cosmic forces, right? epochs and ages and kings and dynasties and cosmic thing, and also big cosmic principles of Maha Shakti and like that. But then there's also the microcosmic, like this story can also speak to us. And we have to be a little careful not to just think, oh, the story's about me,
No.
right? There's stories about sati and about like, but it's also about me, right? You know, you cannot deny that also and interpret that interpretation. And some have given a lot of emphasis to the personal interpretation as very insightful and meaningful almost like a spiritual psychology, mythic psychology. And I think it's very useful. But sometimes when we lose track of the larger principle and the traditional understanding, sometimes we untie it too much, and then we take it in ways that the authors couldn't have possibly met. Although it maybe we could say, oh, maybe it's what it means to me. We can say that. Nobody can stop having something what it means to you, right? But we should start what it means to me. What was it meant? What's the intention of the authors? And that telling this ancient story, all right? But in the Devi Bhagavatam, I believe that it's also meant to be us also, right? We can also hear what they're saying, you know. So, and when we were just talking to Carolyn about answering Carolyn's question of the struggle between our own consciousness. How do we want the infinite awareness of Shiva, right? The unbounded awareness of the self, of Brahman, or something like, of Mahadevi, Padashakti, but we're trapped we're all Dakshayanis. We're all sons and daughters of Daksha. We're born in our family. We're born in our culture. We're born with good or bad, whatever that means, right? But they're limited. We're born with conditions, and we're conditioned, and our consciousness is conditioned. And in a certain sense, we have to go beyond. That's why it's not just a yajna, it's a yoga agni. It's a yoga yajna. It's a yajna of spiritual practice, right? You know, so yoga means spiritual practice. Union of two spiritual practice is yoga. Yoga is the goal of union or transcendence, and it's the process, the spiritual practices. So it could be, and commentaries have been written. And we've spoken on this story in our years ago in the Srimad Bhagavatam classes, also interpreting it this way. Also, there's also a story about our own sadhana, how we can transcend and be free from our limitations through spiritual practices, through samadhi, like this, and you know. So it is that also. It's microcosmic in a couple different ways, and microcosmic in a couple different ways, right? Many different ways, right? What is it meaning? And sometimes the story is told in different texts to mean something different. The same stories are told to emphasize something different. So in the Devi Bhagavatam, it's told for a reason. We'll continue that next week. A little different than the way it's told in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is for devotional, ultimate devotional content. This is about the supremacy of Devi ultimately, and her as a source and substratum of everything. Without her, everything becomes just like we described. And we need her, and this is what happens. How do we get her back? Is what we're going to talk about. And then the whole Devi Gita is how to keep her. Once we have her, how to keep her.
Yeah.
Because they see her, and then they ask, okay, thank you, and you'll be born, great, but in a second, you're going to disappear. They have a vision, and the problem with any spiritual experience is temporary, right? And so what happens? How do we always love you? Once you're gone, how do we not forget you? Right. You see, when she disappeared, the whole world went to hell.
Yeah.
Right. But she's going to disappear again. If she sees the gods are seeing her, she's going to disappear again. And it says she disappeared in front of their vision. It means they don't see her again. Right. What do you do? Right. So the whole Devi Gita, really, the content of Devi Gita is how do we always see her when we're not seeing her? That's I think the real yogic sacrifice and tapasya sacrifice. Hari Om Tat Sat. Ranamali, you?
A reference to the story of Taraka in the Vamana Purana.
You mentioned there's a story, the reference to the story of Taraka and the Vamana Purana.
And another reference with Kartikeya.
Yeah, Kartikeya, yes. So the connection, the different Puranas, the Vamana Purana, also the Kurma Purana, I think tells the story also, if I remember properly. These are strongly Shakta Puranas. And the Mahabharata tells the story. And ultimately, and sometimes Taraka is not killed in this story, giving a little bit the underway, Kartikeya, Skanda is going to be born to Parvati and Shiva and kill Taraka. Only such a person can kill Taraka. Right, but other stories in other versions, other people kill Taraka. Right, so Taraka is, and so one way to tell that the story has changed over time. There's mistakes in the story. Other version is that the same demons born in different ages and different realms. There's ways of justifying, right, the repetitions and the changes in the stories, right. But so that's what it says. Sometimes these demon killing demon tales, as the scholars call them, right, fight between gods and demons and their eventual defeat of the demons and the success of the gods, right. Those are going to be told differently in different places, and also Skanda, we're going to find out a little bit. We won't tell much because he's not mentioned the name, I think, even once here, but he's going to be eventually be born. He's also like, where did he come from? What texts are describing him, right? He's mentioned he's a Vedic deity, he's a pre-Vedic deity, and he wasn't always the son of Shiva. Some places have him as an independent deity. All these stories and deities, and other places he kills a different set of demons, right? So sometimes the exact details are important because what we're reading is important. We should read it properly and know what's being said, but it's not the only way these stories are told. The stories are told differently, and the stories are also different. So we'll hopefully eventually get through them.
I was just referring to it because, like, in the tradition of, if you look at Subramaniam and if you look at Skanda or Murugan, in that tradition, and there's this whole offering that I've seen performed where there's this depiction of the battle between the ousting of the demon Taraka, right? And so that comes just as you said, it's a different interpretation or take on whatever Shakta lineage or cultural lineage you come from. So the Dravidian is rooted a lot in the Murugan Subramaniam.
Muruga is very that's his realm.
That's right. So that's where I get, the whole aspect of Taraka as the son of Vajranaika, I think.
Yes.
And so it's so interesting when you look at the
his family is interesting. I don't know how much. I don't know how far. Next week. It's only half a verse left, right, or one verse left on Taraka, right? But we're trying to figure out how much to say, because his family, his brothers, very interesting. His two brothers, eventually, when they get defeated by him, they get a special place. When they get defeated by Subramanya defeats Taraka, his brothers get special boons. One of them becomes Ma's lion, right, and the other one becomes Kartikeya's peacock. Right, so that's also interesting, and that's a big theme also, where some demonic energy or deity, when they get humbled, they have a new position as the Vahana, and that also shows that when the goddess stands on something, it's showing her absolute conquering of that thing, right? And now the thing that used to be an enemy is now a servant, right? It's another fully, and so taken psychologically, we'll find out what these Taraka and his family represent, perhaps, when the final thing, those become, rather than enemies, they become the vehicles, right? They take on a whole another, anyways, very, very, a whole nother, example of this is Ganesha riding a mouse. The mouse is also a demon that represents all kinds of stuff, but he now rides the mouse, now he's controlling it. Right, this demon is now no longer ruining people's life. It's now being fully controlled by the Lord that gives people protection and prosperity. So the Vahana idea is very fascinating topic of who stands on who, who rides on what. So interesting. Kali rides on Shiva. So we'll see. You can guess what you can guess what her position means. That position means. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om. think we'll probably end there. I think it's getting late. Thank you for your kind attention once again, and this is next week. We'll continue, and very quickly we'll go to the devas doing a fascinating set of austere practices. So all the things that we want to do and we should learn to do, they themselves will say what they do. So we'll see that our sadhanas that we're doing, or that we're trying to do, or maybe you want to learn to do, are not new. They're not made up by us or by the latest guru or website or book or magazine that's come. They're even the gods did japa and kirtan and nyasa and puja and fasting and on pilgrimage. All these things that we try to do, these have been done since the foundation of the world. All right, Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. All blessings. Oh, let me get on my gallery so I can see who's here. Jai Ma, Durga Dasi and Giri, Jai Ma, Alex, Jai Ma, Sundari, Jai Ma, Om Ananda, Elijah, Om,
Jai Ma.
Shelby, Jai Ma, Krishna Chaitra, I don't see him, but I see his name. Good. Om. All right, well, the Wi-Fi, Carolyn, the Wi-Fi worked okay. We had some fun trying to get it going today, but it worked all right, so I'm glad. Good. I felt very bad if I had to cancel. All right. Hari Om Tat Sat, Hari Om Tat Sat, Hari Om Tat Sat. Sitaram, Jai Ma Ananda, Jai Ma. Hari Om. Elijah's always last.
I have to.
Yeah.
No,
No, you hang up.
no, I love humor. No, I love.
Like that. Hari Om.